We're live. All right, Nikki, we are actually live. How exciting. For the folks that are dialing in, grab yourself a coffee. We're going to start in just a minute. I'll go ahead and put a challenge. Oh, crap. I guess you can tell. I was going to ask anybody if they knew what that album poster was behind me, but since it says Arctic Monkeys right on it, we're just going to move well past that because that sucks. I guess I should mute myself. Rookie mistake. All right. Everybody, let us know where you're coming from, what part of the world. Nikki, just so you know, we've had folks from Pakistan, from Italy, from France, from Spain, from Istanbul, Ireland, UK. You take your pick. We got an incredible group that dials in, which I love. So, folks, smack that share button and share this with your friends that are out there. Smack on the love button, the like button, you name it. As long as it's a button, smack it. I think that sounds really good. If you have questions, throw them in that comment section. We will get to them. We are going to try to cover as much as we can today. Ooh, Chicago. God, I'd love to be in Chicago right now. Saudi Arabia, loving it. All right. I think that's our first person from Saudi on the call. We've had some folks from Pakistan. I don't think we've had anybody from Saudi, so that just made my day. Nigeria. Okay, Nikki. We have an international audience on today, which thrills me. So with that, we're going to jump in. Good morning, folks. Welcome to the 16th episode of FinTech Insider, the Breakfast Show US. This is a show from the folks in 11FS, bringing you interesting insights into FinTech and banking landscape. I'm Sam Maule. I'm the 11FS Managing Director for North America. I'm your host for this. Do let us know where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from our viewers. As always, ask questions. We will get to those. And share the live stream on LinkedIn or on Twitter if you can. Today, we're happy to be joined by Nicky Goulimis. She's the co-founder and COO at Nova Credit, the company that helps people without U.S. credit get access to loans, apartments, phones, contracts, and much, much more. And Nikki, I believe you are in, which part of New York are you in right now? Forgot.
Brooklyn? I'm in Brooklyn.
Brooklyn.
Well remembered.
Brooklyn. There you go. A shout out to Brooklyn. Very nice part of New York. What's your favorite restaurant in Brooklyn, Nikki? Come on, give somebody a shout out.
That is a very hard choice. Okay, so this fancy restaurant that I'm hoping to go to is called Lalu, which opened in my neighborhood. And then Ample Hills is my local ice cream store, which I go to far too often.
Okay, the next time I'm in New York, and man, I can't wait for that to happen. I know where I'm going. Shout out to the folks joining from Oklahoma. I love that. I'll start singing. And North Carolina. Hey, Kelly. We have got a heck of a group in. Like I said, ask questions because this is going to be a very interesting topic. Nikki, if you don't mind, kind of give us a quick overview of who Nova Credit is and what y'all do.
Yeah, sure. And actually, I think, Sam, you did a great job in pitching us, so we should get you doing that more often. But effectively, we are a solution to enable immigrants to the U.S. to access credit products, whether that's loans, apartment rentals, cell phone plans that they need. We've built a cross-border credit bureau, so effectively we integrate with credit bureaus all around the world, and we bring that data here to the US so that we can unlock new futures for immigrants and new opportunities for the businesses that serve them.
And what I love most about Nova Credit, this always gets back to the best founders found companies based upon a use case or situation they've been through. So if you don't mind, Nikki, talk a little bit about how the idea came about and you know, that backstory, if you don't mind.
Sure. So I was an international student to the US. There are millions of us every single year. And when I came here, I had lived in the UK for a number of years. And in the UK, I had a credit card, I had a car loan, I had a student loan. And when I came to the US, I lost all of that and had to start from scratch. So when I tried to apply for a credit card, I got rejected. When I tried to get a student loan, I was charged an exorbitant rate, all because I had no financial identity here in the US. And so, you know, armed with total naivete, we were like, why don't we build a credit bureau that's global to solve this? And here we are today.
Yeah, there's nothing easier than building a credit bureau. Let me just tell you.
It turns out.
Yeah, and, you know, it is one of those. Don't you love it when you're like, yeah, I think this is where we're going to do this, and then you're like, once you look under the hood or the bonnet, or I don't know, yo, a guy from Nigeria, do you call it a bonnet or a hood? I would love to know. True story. I lived in the UK for 5 years. I had a real nice car where I had to do something and I couldn't find the hood release, as we'd say in the US. So I pulled out the instruction manual and I couldn't find anything that told me where the hood release was. And I walked in the house and my wife looked at me and goes, "It's called the bonnet, you moron." And she was right. I went out, found it, and I was able to do it. Incredibly hard to do. I went through that experience when I lived in the UK, Nikki. I walked in. The only thing that saved me from trying to go out and get a car or anything like that was because of my income level, right? I was at a certain income level, which allowed me to get treated nicely, if you will, by the banking system. But that's usually not the case, right?
Yeah. And even that is a duct tape solution. And so how do you build something that is a set of infrastructure that's scalable, that's sustainable, that can work around the world and work for everyone?
Yeah. Oh, and Kojo, and I'm probably soldering that, from Ghana. I'm not kidding, Nikki. We got somebody from everywhere.
Oh, wonderful.
A great comment. Just came in. I wish Nova Credit was around 11 years ago when I came to the U.S. as an international student. No one wanted to offer me a credit card. So, no financial identity. And I'm guessing that's an incredibly common case, right?
Yeah, I mean, we hear that all the time. Both folks saying to us, I wish you'd existed when I had moved, as well as if you think about the migrant population, in the US alone, there are 47 million immigrants and about 2.5 million arrivals every single year. Around the world, the migrant population is 250 million people and actually forecast to grow to over 400 million in the next couple of decades. So this, what may often seem like a niche, this is just a handful of people problem that we hear here and there. Like this is the future of the world. Even despite what's going on today, the fact is the world remains more and more globalized and will continue to become more and more globalized. And so serving people across geographies, creating a retail banking system that is fair and inclusive and can work across the world is the problem that financial institutions are going to have to solve going forward.
Yeah, we're going to talk about the kind of what's happening in the U.S. A bit, specifically around immigrants, around green cards and everything else toward the end of this, because Nova Credit has done some very interesting things and it's been vocal in this space, which I really appreciate. We've had questions, quite a few folks in the comments channel asking questions like, what's the eligibility criteria for a loan if you're coming in, and what's the advantage of then reaching out to Nova Credit? I mean, can you talk a little bit about this? I'm a first-time customer, let's put it that way.
Yeah, sure. So Nova Credit, we're we're a little bit behind the scenes. So we don't actually issue loans ourselves. We don't rent apartment ourselves. Like when we started the business, we decided, we could go down one of two paths. We could be a point solution we would issue some form of loan ourselves, or we could build a bunch of infrastructure and try and make this universally accessible to the industry. And so what we do is we work across the board with student lenders, with credit card companies, with car lease companies, with apartment tenant screening companies, with telco companies, and so on and so forth, to make this universally accessible. So criteria are set. They're the ones that host the application. But Nova Credit is embedded as part of that application to help you pull your data from overseas. So all we need, it depends on the country. I think in Nigeria, we need, recent address, name. We need a few details to be able to map your domestic identity in Nigeria and find your credit file there and bring it here to the US. But those are sort of the types of parameters we need are primarily identity, just to find your data.
So you just got a bunch of clapping emojis while you were talking about that. This is always, whenever I sit on like these Shark Tank panels or Dragon's Den panels, or whatever you want to call them, at different conferences, and people are pitching their ideas, the one thing I'm always telling people is, believe it or not, one of the sexiest part of financial services is the underlying plumbing, right? It's everything that's behind the scenes. And that's actually where most of the work needs to be.
I mean, I think
because
that
it is so
couldn't be more true.
Yeah, I mean, it's, and you think about what you're doing, and correct me if I'm wrong, if conceptually I have this. You're the equivalent of a data translator, right? You're taking all these credit reports and all these data points from countries all across the globe. It comes into, and excuse me for this, the little black box of Nova Credit, which then translates it and is able to feed that out. Is that a good analogy?
That's a great analogy.
Thank God.
I think we're like one of those, interlanguage dictionaries where you would look up hood versus bonnet. We do that at a credit reporting scale. And we also ensure that, all our data is compliant. So there's a lot of data processing that has to happen for it to be able to be delivered. And then, management of the security of the data, of the quality of the data. But yes, we are a connector. And I think, our thesis is that, and I know you have a lot of fintech listeners on general on this show, is that, fintech change can only occur at an ecosystem level. And so we're creating ecosystem level technology.
So a really good question that came in from Sid Rahar. One, great idea, Nikki. So good.
Thank you.
Are there some basic requirements for U.S. credit institutions to accept credit reports from foreign countries? That is, are credit reports from other countries not accepted in the U.S., and why?
Yes, so other credit reports from other countries are not accepted in the US. Nova Credit is the first player to make this possible. And that's kind of crazy when you think about it. You think about, you have players, let's take Citibank. They have a truly global bank all over the world. They already have partnerships with these international credit bureaus. They're already using that data in the country, but they can't actually bring that to the US. And the reason for that is fairly complex. So you have, first of all, just the fact that a lot of international credit data will not be compliant with US regulation. So for instance, if I take a credit file from India, it reports gender. We can't use that in the US here. So you need to do it. The second is you need to scrub the data. The second is standardization. No credit officer wants to have to deal with 194 different formats. And then the third is actually much more regulatory. So for a bank to be able to use a set of credit data, they need to know that there is an entity that stands behind it and is going to manage that data. And that has to be a US entity. So you need to have a US entity that's going to manage, if the consumer wants to and do many other elements of verification and validation and data storage like that. So the summary of that is there's a lot of regulatory and analytic complexity, and no one's been bothered to do it, and we've had the folly to try and do it.
So we definitely have a fintech geek crowd on today, which I'm happy about. I love y'all. Don't get me wrong. I'm a fintech geek. So the questions that are coming though, I love this. So Andy, who is with an ID verification company, would new to country be considered a thin file application as far as the bureaus are concerned?
A thin file or no file? Yes.
There you go. Veronica at Truist, by the way, in Atlanta. Hey, Veronica, who, by the way, is joining me for a FinTech social hour, happy hour that I do every Wednesday night. If you want to know more about that, ping me because I'd love to have you on. Veronica, please don't show up with White Claw. If you come up and you show up with White Claw, I'm disinviting you. But anyways, good question. She's interested in the authentication piece. How do you screen your clients?
You mean the consumers?
That's a tough question. It's got to be, the consumers that you're bringing
in. So my answer to most questions is it varies by country. It turns out when you're building a global business, that's kind of what you learn.
And how many countries do you support so far?
And we have about another 10 or so that we've signed and are currently integrating. And that includes countries like Nigeria, South Korea, India, Mexico, Brazil, UK, Canada. We can keep going. But on the authentication question, it does vary by country. So some countries, it will be something like a one-time password. Some countries, it will be things like knowledge-based authentication. We also do matches of actual IDs as well. And so it's the full spectrum. In many ways, we're sort of we're constrained by what our underlying partners do, and we try and adhere to their standards.
All right, great question coming out of Nigeria. In Nigeria, where credit system is not common, what system or data do you integrate with? Is it financial transaction history? I mean, how would that work?
So in Nigeria, there are a number of credit bureaus. We work with one of them today, and we're actually working to get more on board. You are right that credit penetration or credit bureau penetration in Nigeria is still low. And so we're actually looking into a number of alternatives. We haven't built them yet, but including things like bank transaction data and telco data. The metric that we measure ourselves on as a company is what is our coverage rate. of the percentage of immigrants who come to the US, who can we actually serve? And that's dictated by, what countries can we serve, and then how can we maximize the data penetration in those countries? And so we are constantly integrating and adding more data sets to our platform to try and close that gap as much as possible.
Man, I'm sorry to start doing product analysis for you or thinking out for your roadmap.
Oh, please.
But I love that you do that here in the US. I'm thinking of countries that have a massive immigrant population. So if I'm not mistaken, Dubai, 86% of the population is not from Dubai, right? I mean, it's literally, it's from all over the world, the workers that are coming in and working there. When does Nova Credit launching in Dubai? And hurry up, please.
We've been having a few of those conversations. I think that we are, our business is kind of, we have this irony where in order to build our business in just one country in the US, we've had to build it all around the world. We've had to build integrations and partnerships with credit bureaus around the world. So in many ways, going global is it's a core part of our mission. The idea is, you want to have a credit passport, you can take it with you wherever you go. When you move to Dubai, to the US, to South Korea, wherever it might be, take that financial identity with you. And so international is core to what we're doing. We've been in conversation with actually a number of countries, and we're starting the process of actually expanding likely into the UK this year, and then starting to look at other countries next year. And a lot of our customers are taking us there already. And you're right that these countries that have big migrant populations are working hard to solve this problem, and so they represent great partners for us.
Man, I've had this conversation multiple times. Just think within banking itself in the U.S., whether or not you're an immigrant or expat or whatever, when you live here, just for me to go from one bank to another, I have to constantly redo everything. And the idea of identity or financial services passporting, which is a lot of what you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
That concept of that, even within the same country, is impossible. I mean, it just doesn't happen here. It's such a royal pain in the ass, to be blunt.
I think that's changing, right? I mean, I think
it is,
if you look at PSD2, open banking, GDPR, there's more and more of this concept of consumers being able to own and manage their data. And in many ways, that is a tailwind that we are riding to.
Which is a great question. Taneem, and I'm probably slaughtered your name, Taneem, asked this, though. How does GDPR impact the business sharing data across the globe? Good question.
Largely, it's a positive for us. It continues to reinforce that consumers own their data and that there should be high standards around managing the data privacy of it. We are a business that we rely on the fact that consumers own their data as part of the regulatory requirements to be able to move it across borders. Moving data across borders that's personally identifiable is, I sort of touched on it a little bit earlier, but again, it gets into a lot of regulatory complexity. And so it is important for us that consumers do own their data. And then, around data privacy standards, we work really hard to have the highest standards there and to ensure that we are protecting that data. And I think every business has a responsibility to do so. With GDPR, we've had to set up some different server structures and things like that. But broadly, it's been a boon to our business.
So I've had like two people say the same thing. Can you please disrupt the monopoly of the big three credit bureaus? With the smiley face emoji. You can just smile at that question.
Smiley face emoji.
Yeah. Well, we'll move on just a little bit. I will say, I think for everybody who's watching this and listening to this, it's so crystal clear to see all the different use cases for this, right? And what the tremendous demand and need for this is, right? I mean, it just is. We no matter what we want to do, globalization is here, right? The concept of us, going to work. I myself, I lived in the UK for, like I said, almost 5 years. So I'm an expat that have done that. And by the way, when I came back into the US, it was a royal pain in the ass because I started all over again, right? It was as if I didn't exist. So trust me, trying to get a mortgage when you've lived overseas for 5 years and explain that process was a joy. Man, it was a joy. But one of the things I really like about Nova Credit, and when I interviewed you for the podcast interview, we talked about this a lot. You just closed a funding round in February, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, and go ahead, brag a little bit. What was the?
Oh, sure.
Give us a little bit of detail.
So we raised $50 million, backed by some terrific investors, including Kleiner Perkins, Canopy, and then a lot of our existing investors, so Index Ventures, First Round Capital, NICA. So really thrilled.
Oh, wait. I'm going to add to that. Ashton Kutcher, A-Rod, The Edge from YouTube.
You know, you're like our team. All we want to talk about is the celebrities, but we love them too. They're great.
They deserve a shout out, man. I'll give them a little golf clap, because those are good, in my opinion, from a celebrity investor standpoint. Having Kutcher, A-Rod, and The Edge, it's pretty good.
No, I mean, I think it's vital, and I think these are people who deeply understand our business, who've already provided a ton of value, especially as we think about, as we build this cross-border credit bureau. We also, we've always been a B2B business, but we do want to have a consumer element, and empowering consumers to own and manage their data. And so, speaking to that consumer segment, understanding them, I think is where they provide just a ton of expertise.
So another good question. What does Nova Credit mean to someone who's finally managed to establish credit in the U.S.? How can they be part of the ecosystem?
If you've managed to finally establish credit in the U.S., congratulations. And we do help people who are thin file. So if your U.S. file is thin and you're applying, you can still use Nova Credit. But if you've got a well-developed U.S. credit file, I would say you probably don't need us. But we do have a lot of resources on our site oriented around newcomers and immigrants. Things like, where can I find my local Indian grocery stores? And why do I need health insurance in the US? And how should I approach it? And all of those different components. So we sort of remain an ally throughout your migration journey, but we are best suited to the point in transition.
So it really does. It's that sense of community, right?
Yeah.
Which, and in your case, a virtual community. But being able to bring them in, and yeah, I love that concept. I want to switch gears just a little bit for the last part of the conversation. So a lot that's going on globally right now with COVID and the impact to the economy, to trade and everything else. I just kind of like to get your feedback. You're an immigrant. You're on I'm assuming a green card, right?
I'm actually not on a green card. I'm on a visa.
Oh, but, you're on a visa. Good. Oh,
yeah.
Good for you. So, in the news just yesterday, the president said in a tweet, it's the only thing I'll say, I'll be signing executive orders prohibiting immigration into our country today. And I'll just stop, because then there's a bunch of BS about a wall. If anybody wants to guess my opinion on that. But it is very interesting, right? That created a slew of questions, both within the White House and the government, of what that meant and what the impact would be. And there's been a little bit of clarification on that today, so that Trump's order will only apply to those seeking employment-based green cards and relatives of green card holders who are not citizens. And as point of reference, about 1 million green cards were granted in 2019, about half going to relatives of U.S. folks. So, we're also looking at the issuance of temporary visas being halted by the State Department. It's caused a bit of a mess. I mean, what's your take on that, if you will? And is Nova Credit kind of touched in on these points at all?
I have a lot to say on this one, so excuse me if I ramble for too long.
I gave you 6 minutes. Do it. Go.
Look, I think we are in a time of crisis right now. There is a global pandemic. It doesn't get more serious than this. And so, of course, governments should be able to manage their borders. New Zealand, Greece, many countries have fully closed their borders and are doing what they need to do to manage their pandemic. And I respect that and understand that. I think when it comes to the issue of visas and green card processing, the reality is that most green card applicants are already in the States. There is also a dynamic around right now processing has already been halted. And so, looking at this executive order in general, I think there's still a lot of work to be done to assess the impact of it and what it will actually do. But I'm concerned about scapegoating immigrants for the unemployment dynamic. And I'm also concerned about the Overton window shifting and this being used in an escalating way to pass immigration changes that the administration may have wanted, but they have nothing to do with the pandemic. The second dimension to this is that immigrants in the US right now, the ones who are already here, are facing a ton of uncertainty for green card holders, uncertainty for visa applicants or visa renewals, myself included, where you are where consulates are closed, borders are closed, so you can't go home to renew. Processing is slowed down, and so folks are facing a choice between their health and whether they should expose their health and how to maintain legal status and do what is required of them by government. And you've seen countries around the world have extended their visa processing timelines, have extended the renewal window in a way that hasn't happened yet in the US. And so at Nova Credit, we've pulled together a coalition of business leaders and have written to all of our representatives. We have an open letter. I'll make sure to link it after this if anyone else wants to join on. But we have 200 and over business leaders just saying, let's make a simple change right now of give 90 days of respite. So 90 days until the state of national emergency or federal emergency is called off. Let's extend any processing or visa timelines just so that people don't have to face this extraordinarily difficult choice between legality and safety. Remembering that immigrants constitute a large population or a large percentage of the healthcare workers, of the small businesses who are most harshly impacted right now. We need these people. Last Friday was Ellis Island Day. We have to honor the contributions of immigrants to this country and just make some common sense temporary changes to be supported in them right now, rather than temporary changes to be pointing the finger at them right now.
Yeah, it's incredibly easy and tempting to go with gut reactions all over the place when you're dealing with a pandemic and an economic meltdown like we're seeing. And this is applicable just not in the U.S., right? We've seen this in the UK with Brexit and the situation with the NHS and the staff, the doctors, nurses, take your pick, janitors, everyone else that works within the system. It's one thing, and I know you do this in New York, because I have a niece that lives in Harlem, that in New York, I think it's 6 or 7 o'clock every night, you get out, you
7
cheer.
o'clock, yeah.
7 o'clock every night, yeah. And I know they're doing the same in London and across the world. That's nice, but it's not addressing an issue. So it would be nice to actually address the underlying issues.
I think they're both super important. I think my hope is that this daily practice of showing appreciation to all of the frontline workers, whether they're in the healthcare space or in the food space or all of the emergency spaces that are serving us and enabling me and you, Sam, to talk from the comfort of our homes today.
Amen.
I hope that gratitude will change into the right policy and business reactions to it, and create an economy that is equitable and inclusive. I am saddened this today and yesterday to see what feels like the beginning of an attack on immigrants, when this is a group that I think is both contributing to relief efforts, but also more vulnerable right now.
Okay. You summed it up well. And Nicky and I talked about this. I have my second oldest daughter is a nurse, works in the ER on the front lines of this. So I have a lot of a personal stake in what happens with this, and it's near and dear to me. And again, we could talk about this all day. The only thing I will say around the immigrant side of this is just to lay a lot of fact. Forbes reported 55% of Americans' billion-dollar startups have an immigrant founder. This includes companies like Affirm, Green Sky, Avon, Warby Parker, Movin. I could do this all day. Tesla, right? So just as a little plea and a little note from the folks here at 11FS, go hug an immigrant today. Go hug a healthcare worker today. Hug. If you know them, if they're self-isolating with you, there you go.
Send a hugging emoji.
Go hug somebody. Yes, I text my daughter every morning, every night. And I think we're all doing more of that. So believe it or not, we're out of time. I'm sorry, Nicky. Again, we could go all day on this. Nicky, where's the best place for this audience to learn more about Nova Credit and what you're doing?
You can find us on our site at novacredit.com. We're also on Twitter, Nova_credit, Facebook, and please do reach out, especially right now. We appreciate learning, and especially from such a global audience today. There's a ton that we can learn from you. So would love to get connected.
Excellent. And everybody, thanks for joining. Tomorrow, we're joined by Jen Tesher from the Financial Health Network. Nicky,
she's really terrific.
She is. We absolutely love her.
And I think,
Discover. Said he's very interested in the link to the letter, Nikki. So,
Will do.
folks, ping her on Twitter. Thank you for joining. We will see you all tomorrow. Thanks.